Moving on then, exclusive right to sell, listing agreement. Should I just jump to the compensation paragraph? So exclusive right to sell, listing agreement paragraph. First, part is pretty self-explanatory. Appointment of brokers, very similar to that in the brokerage, the buyer agency agreement. Here you're going to fill out your property address for whatever property it is you're going to list. And try and fill this out as completely as possible. Paragraph 3, once again, notice sections. Please fill it out. When in doubt, fill it out. Not so critical here on the seller side because most times the seller is selling the property that they're living in. But if you have an investor that's selling a property that may be tenant occupied or vacant and they live somewhere else, it's not a bad idea to fill that section out. Paragraph 4 is the agreement term. This has offered a lot of confusion as well, so we're going to kind of talk about this paragraph a little bit in depth. So paragraph 4 talks about your agreement term. The agreement will run for the period commencing upon signature by all parties and expiring at 11/59 on whatever that date is. So I like to see a date in there versus 90 days or whatever. But if you don't fill it in, it does terminate 90 days from the date that it's signed. So keep that in mind. B, listing term. Okay? The listing term begins when the seller instructs broker to allow any potential buyers to learn about the property. Listing term shall go into effect on or before whatever the date is that you put in there, with the expiration date coinciding with the expiration date of this agreement term, or extending as provided for above. Listing shall be entered in the MLS within 2 days of the start of the listing term, or as MLS rules require. It is understood that listing term effective date may or may not coincide with the agreement date. So a lot of questions here, right? The old way. So we have to not think about the old way, right? So the old way before is we get a listing agreement signed. Within 2 days, we have to do what? We used to have it in the MLS as coming soon, active, or as an office exclusive. Now, we don't have to do that, right? Now, I have a listing appointment today and they sign up on the dotted line. Today is September the 9th. Now, they don't want to go on the market until October the 1st. They don't want you to advertise. They don't want you to do anything until October 1st when you're going to go coming soon. Do I have to do anything? No. What's my list? My listing agreement, my listing term date would be October 1st. So I don't have to do anything until October 1st. Now what happens if I'm having to chat with the seller and I say, hey, I'd like to advertise this property in my office. I'd like to put it on First Up. I'd like to put it on our Facebook page just to see if I can generate any interest. If they agree, I have just changed the listing term date, which means I have to have it in the MLS as coming soon, office exclusive, or active within 2 business days, right? Or 2 days, right? Or is it business? 2 days. So you no longer do we have to do the MLS form anymore until we start to market the property as an office exclusive. If we're not going to do that, then you don't have to worry about that form anymore. So the listing term date is the date that the property is going to go in the MLS as active, coming soon, or as an office exclusive. That would be your listing term date. Questions? Excellent. I have done an outstanding job. Woohoo, baby.
And we're all happy.
I love you guys. Don't any of you call me asking me about that. So, listing price. Self-explanatory here. We're going to put in a price. If you're signing this agreement way out, it is okay to do TBD. But you should do a brokerage representation agreement amendment outlining the price prior to going live, right? So If it's TBD in here, make sure you follow that up later on. You know why? Because your sky slope reviewer is going to catch that, and you're going to have to do it later. So be ahead, right, instead of behind. Paragraph 6. I'm going to skip this and go on to paragraph 7. Okay, paragraph 6 is listing broker compensation. So the listing broker compensation and buyer compensations are fully negotiable and are not fixed, controlled, recommended, or suggested by Sampson Law. No, it doesn't say Sampson, but law or the multiple listing service. Paragraph A is the listing broker compensation. So here is what you're going to tell your seller how much you're charging them specifically to list their property for sale. Whatever the amount, however many donuts you're going to charge your seller is what you would put here. And it can be a percentage, it can be a flat fee, or it can be a percentage and a number. So, and I see all different kinds so far. So, and I see numbers that I sometimes ask whether or not they're still thinking total compensation. So, I mean, I've seen 6%, 3%, 4%, 4.5%, all over the board. So you can imagine. So I'm assuming some people still think we're in the July 2024 contract and they're putting, or June 2024 contract and they're putting total compensation here. But I figure when they get the settlement, they'll work it all out. But hopefully. But the brokerage agreement, so here, like if you're charging just a flat percentage, you would put the flat percentage in. Or if you're charging a flat fee, you would put that dollar amount. Or, you know, some folks charge, say, 3% plus a consult fee or a staging fee or whatever that additional amount would be. Please don't, you really shouldn't put the $395 fee here. But some people do, and I sign it, that's okay. But you really should put that $395 fee in paragraph D, which is the listing broker service fee, okay? The next paragraph, it says broker compensation is also earned if within X amount of days after the expiration or termination of the agreement, a ratified contract with a willing, ready, able buyer to whom the property has been shown during the agreement term or provided. However, the broker compensation need not be paid if a contract is ratified on a property while the property is listed with another broker real estate company. So once they sign up with another company, you're out. So questions on that paragraph? Just that paragraph. Mr. Mocater, hold on a second.
On the commission, right? So commission will be the total commission from the seller, then we can split.
It's the listing, this is the listing broker compensation. There is no, you have to retrain your brain. There is no total commission anymore. There is no total compensation. Total compensation is gone. Total compensation was, hey seller, you're going to pay me 6%. From my 6%, I'm going to pay 3, 2, 4, whatever that number is. It's not that way anymore. Now it's, how much are you going to pay me for all the wonderful things that I'm going to do for you as a listing agent? And here they all are, and that's my fee.
But we need to let the buyer know when they call that, hey,
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Oh, okay.
You're ahead of me.
And the one more question is the listing price, right? So let's say that I put it on the market for $500,000, right? And it doesn't go, so I need to reduce the, the sales price. So I need to send the amendment for the price change?
Brokerage representation agreement amendment.
Okay.
So there used to be a listing amendment. Now they have a brokerage representation agreement amendment that covers all the brokerage agreements. So any change you're going to do to any brokerage agreement, which is a listing agreement for sale, rent, a buyer agency agreement, a tenant rep agreement, any agreement, brokerage agreement you would make now on the brokerage representation agreement amendment.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
I got to come up with an acronym for that. The brokerage,
Strangers, I'm sorry, wrong audience. Hey, Steve. So the question is as follows. I'm working with someone, and we've agreed that I will represent them at 2.5%. But if I produce the buyer too, since there is no other side to pay to, they're willing to pay me 3%. Is there a line to actually put that in?
So hold that question. I'm going to hear that question, and I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to move on. So I'm going to move on to paragraph 6B, additional listing broker compensation for unrepresented buyers. I am the listing agent, and a buyer comes to me unrepresented. They are not with a buyer. They don't have an agent. Am I going to charge the seller any additional compensation for me to do the work for an unrepresented buyer? If you're smart, the answer is yes. If you're dumb, get out. No. If you're smart, the answer is yes. But I see a lot of these blank, okay? And I don't know if they just don't understand it or what. So this paragraph is for an unrepresented buyer comes to you and they say, "Hey, Steve, I want to make an offer on this property." And I say, "Sure, unrepresented buyer, I'm going to do it." Here, but I already know here, because we've already agreed to it, that my commission is going to go from A to B. And it's A plus B. It's not A to B. So unrepresented buyer, if anyone produces a buyer ready, willing, and able to buy property, and such buyer is not represented by a broker at the time of ratification of the contract, seller will pay broker the following in addition to the broker compensation. And here you have all the same numbers that you could put in above. So you have to put in a number here if a buyer comes unrepresented. Okay? What's your number? Huh? No. Unrepresented buyer is not dual agency. You have a buyer unrepresented, you have a seller represented by Sampson Properties. The buyer has to sign a disclosure for unrepresented parties. We, Sampson, you, Mo Cater, as the agent, are the representative of the seller. The buyer is unrepresented. How much money additionally are you going to get for doing all that work? Because there's no agent on the other side. You have to draft the contract. You have to negotiate through the home inspection. You have to check on the lender. You have to get through the appraisal. You have to get through financing. You have to get to settlement. You have to get everybody there. How much are you going to charge for that? Okay? What's that number? I can't tell you. But put a number in there. 1%. 3%, $75, I don't care. Put a number in there.
But Steve, so I have a listing, and I went through the seller and I explained to him if I was to get the buyer, blah, 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 all that good stuff, like almost a day arguing with this guy. So now he's telling me that he will consider it. So then now it goes back to that broker addendum, bra, whatever.
Yes, the brokerage representation agreement amendment.
Because that's doable too.
People watching this video are going to say, "Man, how many times?" They're
So
going to
that's
count
what you
how
were
many times
thinking.
I've said that.
So when you got my listing agreement, were you thinking, "Oh, she's dumb"? Because I didn't have it on there. I didn't have it
I
on
might
there.
have.
I'm represented.
I might have said that.
I know. Okay,
I
well,
doubt
thank
it.
you.
I don't look at people individually.
Oh, I've gotten some emails from you.
But so I personally would recommend that you fill that out in the how many people, by the show of hands in here, have ever listed a property and sold to an unrepresented buyer and not made any additional money from it? Who did it the first time? Okay, I'm going to put my hand up and say the first time I did it for free. I never did it again after that. Okay? Why? Because I worked twice as hard and got the same amount of money. Well, that's excuse. It was a family member, that's okay. You're a good man. You're a good man. So, any questions on the additional listing broker compensation for unrepresented buyers? I highly, highly, highly encourage you to put a number in there. All right, paragraph C is variable rate compensation. You might use this paragraph. I don't see as much use for this paragraph now that we have this new system, but maybe if you're working for a team and you're offering a discount if another team member does it or something like that, that could possibly be something that you might do variable rate compensation. Otherwise, I can't really think of anything. Paragraph D is your listing broker service fee. Once again, I highly recommend that you write it in here, $395. If you're paying for it on behalf of your client, just put it in the other provisions that you're paying it on behalf of them.
Steve, I have a question.
It's always a good idea for me to get a drink of water.
Now that variable rate compensation, if you do that prior to this August 14, you have to divulge that information on Bright.
You do, yes.
Now, do you still have that provision in there?
Yeah, there's still variable rate compensation disclosure in Bright.
And
Yes.
what do we do? We're supposed to say
You would
yes
still
or no?
you would still disclose that. So say you and I are on the same team and we do a listing and we tell the seller that, hey, if we sell it in-house to one of our other agents, because we have 62 team members, then we're going to reduce the amount of money that we're going to ask for you for.
Oh,
So
okay.
by 1%. And you would just write that in there. And then you have to disclose it because if I'm a buyer coming in with another client and I'm making an offer on your property and I'm going to put 3% in for my seller subsidy and I call you and I say, hey, are you or any of your team members, I notice in the MLS it says check for variable rate compensation. Are any of you or your teammates writing an offer on this property? And if so, what's the variable rate
Yeah, you
net
have
to
to
the
tell.
seller?
Yes.
So now I can write an offer that I can put in that's favorable to my client because I know that you're giving your seller a 1% discount if you sell it within your team.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yes. All right. So retainer fee, once again, retainer fee. If you're going to charge one, like I said, Mr. Larry Anderson does. If he does, everybody should. No, I'm just kidding. But if you charge one, put it in here. Probably not as detrimental in a listing side than it might be in a buyer agency side. But you would put that in, submit it through Sampson. There's a form for that, and you would get your money through Sampson. All right, early termination. In the event the seller wishes to terminate this agreement prior to the end of the term, seller will deliver written notice to terminate and the agency relationship between the parties. The parties will then execute a release of brokerage representation. So there's two forms now, right? So it does say a notice. There is a notice in SkySlope for terminating. But if the seller emails you and says they're going to terminate, that could be considered to be notice. So you don't have to do that form if you don't want to, but there is. You should fill out the agreement to terminate. There is a termination of brokerage relationship that you should use. I know a lot of people use the brokerage representation agreement amendment to terminate, cancel, withdraw, those type of things, but there really is a separate agreement for that. So just an FYI. Now, if you're going to put a fee in there for terminating, did you ever have a class where your instructor banged on the floor when he was telling you testing items, right? Bang, 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 right? You really do want to have a termination fee in here. Why? If you put 0 or leave this blank, then if I am displeased with one aspect or anything in our agreement or something that's going on, I can terminate you at a whim. If that's okay with you, then leave it blank and put 0 in there. But if you want to get compensated for at least what you got into a property, whatever that number is, I can't tell you. I would recommend that you put a number in there. That way, I mean, the seller can always terminate for cause, and you can always waive your termination fee if for whatever reason everybody mutually agrees to terminate. But without a number in here, the seller could just email you and say, hey, I want to terminate. And you, theoretically, by the letter of the law of this contract, you have to allow them to terminate. There's no fee, and it says right here they can terminate at any time. Okay, so make sure that you fill this out, right? The NVAR has put this in here, why? For our protection, right? They're trying to protect us as real estate agents. This is a protection method for us, right? So use it, right, to our benefit. I know we don't want to make the seller not think about listing their property with us because we're putting a termination fee. Well, that's great if you're working for family like Mo over there. But if you're working for someone and you're going to invest, photos, staging, thousands of dollars to get their property ready for sale and allow them to terminate because they woke up one morning and they didn't like something for whatever reason. It could have been the news. It doesn't necessarily have to be you. Donald Trump got elected and they're pissed off at you, whatever. But it could be anything, right? So put something in there, what you want to be compensated at. Paragraph 7. Optional seller paid buyer compensation. Man, I can't believe I got this far. So optional paid buyer broker compensation. A, generally, prospective buyers may retain a broker who represents their interests only, so the seller has the option to agree to pay some or all of the fees of the buyer's broker in this transaction, which will be payable upon settlement. Buyer broker compensation. Seller has no obligation to pay the buyer broker compensation. Buyer's broker compensation is negotiable and will ultimately be determined by a ratified sales contract between the seller and the buyer. So far, so good, right? B, disclosure. Seller authorizes or does not authorize broker to disclose to prospective buyers and brokers presenting buyer or seller willingness to negotiate with buyer regarding seller payment of, in whole or in part, broker compensation. So as we talked about briefly before, here is where you have to have seller. Is it okay are you interested? Number one. Number two, is it okay if we disclose the amount or the interest of you offering buyer agent compensation? So you would check the appropriate box here. We're good? I love you guys. C, seller approval of optional buyer broker compensation. In the event the seller desires that the broker disclose, so we check the box up above, disclosed, right? And or market, subject to applicable MLS rules and regulation, which means you can put it on your website, you can put it on your brochures, you can do whatever you want with it, but you can't put it in the MLS, right? The buyer must obtain the seller's approval in writing in advance of any such disclosure or marketing, any agreement to pay or payment, and must specify the amount or rate disclosed or marketed. Okay, so we understand that, right? We do or we don't? We do. Okay, what's your clarification?
I understand, but I want to make sure I understand.
Okay.
So if we are to market as allowed, when we do market, we have to disclose the actual amount or just that the seller is willing to offer a compensation?
That is a good question. And I'm going to talk really slow while I load up the form. So it's really nice that you guys all came today. All right. So my bad for not having this. But so to carry on, right? So if the seller authorizes, right? So now you have to add this form, right? So what it's telling you is the seller approval of optional buyer broker compensation. So now I have to add this additional form, which unfortunately is not part of your package. Sorry to tell you that. So, but it's in Sky Slope. Come on, man. Come on. Oh, I'm done here.
What's the form's number?
So this is NVAR K1403. Okay? So this was one of the new forms that came out in August 14th of 2024. All right. So if you're going to offer buyer agent compensation, you should fill this form out, okay? And it should be a part of your listing agreement. If you look at the listing agreement now too, go all the way back to the back page of your listing agreement to where it has additions, right? So paragraph 32 has short sale, solar panel, or addendum buyer broker compensation, right? So it's listed here as well, so you can't forget it. Well, you might, but you shouldn't. So the purpose of this addendum is to supplement certain provisions of the listing agreement as specified below. Except for those terms expressly added herein, the addendum shall not alter, modify, or change the listing agreement in any other respect, and all other terms, provisions of the listing agreement are ratified and confirmed and shall remain in full force and effect. Seller approval of optional buyer broker compensation. And then, of course, we have our hold harmless statement here that it seems like they have everywhere. Seller acknowledges and agrees that seller has no obligation to pay buyer's broker compensation. The buyer's broker compensation is negotiable. So we've read that a couple times already. Now we get down to the actual thing here, right? The parties agree to supplement the listing agreement to include the following. Check all that apply, okay? Number one, seller is willing to pay buyer broker compensation up to the following amount. If yes, choose one. So you check that. Are they willing to pay it? Yes or no? Okay? If they're not, then you don't have to check anything or put anything in here. So paragraph 2 is the seller authorizes broker to disclose and or market in accordance with applicable MLS rules and regulations seller's willingness to pay buyer broker compensation up to the amount set forth in paragraph 1. So if I'm a seller and I authorize you to I'm interested in paying a buyer agent compensation of 2%, 2.5%. But I don't want you to disclose it. I would only fill out paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, I would tell you I don't want you to tell anybody, right? It's a secret. Maybe it's not a secret. So you could say, okay, well, it's not a secret, so you're going to check both boxes. And then you're going to have your seller sign and a broker sign with your listing agreement. Have everybody seen this form before? No? Man. Did you guys missed? I know Mike and Dave talked about this form when they did the one on August the 6th, I think it was. If you want to see that, you can watch it on Samson U. I think it's moved to Samson U by now. But that one talks about these forms as well, especially the changes. But this is the form now. So part of your listing agreement, right, when you have that conversation pertaining to paragraph 7 of your listing agreement, you're gonna say, seller, do you want to pay any type of seller paid buyer agent compensation? They're going to say yes or no, and you're going to say no, okay, let's move on. They're going to say yes, you're going to say, okay, I got another form right here, whip it out, and you're going to go over this form right here and fill it out appropriately. So if the seller says, yes, I'm willing to entertain a buyer agent compensation, but let them tell me what it is. I don't need this form. Okay? So the seller says, I'm okay with paying a buyer agent compensation. However, I don't have a number. Whatever, I'm willing to entertain offers, but I don't have a number. I'm not going to, whatever. Then you really don't need this form, because this form is designed for you to disclose whatever that amount of money is that the seller is willing to pay. Now when I had my listing, right, my seller didn't want to disclose, but he said if someone did call and they pushed me, I could disclose. So I filled out this form and I put in the 2.5%, and I wrote a little note down near it that said, only to be disclosed to buyer agents that press me or are not willing to show the property. Okay. And he was fine with that.
Nobody gets push you.
Hey, man. Well, like I said, my seller didn't want to lose a potential buyer because I wouldn't disclose that amount. So I did this form to cover my butt, right? So, but it's not required if your seller just says, yeah, well, we'll entertain it, but just tell them to submit offers. And then whatever is there, and that's going to range, of course, right? All right, one more.
Okay, Steve, I got a little bit confused here. When you say optional, seller paid buyer's broker compensation, if a seller says yes, then you have to use K1403 form. And
If the
then,
seller has a number and they
Yeah, if
want to
seller has
disclose a
number.
number, yes.
what about this B, section B on the 17, paragraph 17B, disclosure? Sellers authorized, say yes,
Where are you at? Number 2?
B,
7B, disclosure, authorize, yes.
say yes. That means what is authorizing here? You say, yes, there is a compensation or there
Right.
is not compensation.
So here is, the seller is willing. So you have that conversation. The seller says, I am willing to negotiate with buyers regarding buyer compensation in a whole or in part. I'm willing to negotiate. I don't have a number. I'm willing to negotiate. I'm not willing to negotiate. I'm not paying a buyer agent's commission whatsoever. Then no.
Okay.
So here the seller is saying, I am willing to pay a buyer agent compensation. Yes. Okay. But I'm not willing to disclose what that number is. Tell them to send it to me. So unless you have a number that you're going to disclose, then that would be what you would want to put in here.
You mean does not then?
Right. Well, here it's still, you're authorized. I have a seller
Yeah.
that is interested in paying, they're willing, not interested, but willing to pay a buyer agent compensation if the right offer comes in under the right terms, all that kind of stuff. But they don't have a number in mind. I'm not going to tell a buyer agent that I'm willing to pay 6% when I'm going to wait and see what my offers are and then negotiate, right? So here I would say authorizes.
Okay, got
And
it.
then over here, I wouldn't use this form.
Yes.
Okay, but if I have a seller, I sit down, some seller who was probably an agent at one time before, and they say, "Oh, buyer agency, I got to pay a buyer agent, blah 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 blah. We're going to pay 2% or 2.5% or whatever." Then you say, "Okay, I'm going to check 2%. Is it okay for me to? Are you authorizing me to disclose or market this number?" Yes, I am. Click that box, and you sign it and move on as part of your listing agreement.
Steve, can you give a template conversation you would have with your listing, with your sellers during the listing agreement about the advantages of offering something?
Well, I'm going to throw that back out to you. Have any of you taken advantage of the free coaching that we offer here at Sampson? Jared James. Yes, I got it. I highly recommend that you take some of these free coaching classes. You think I make this stuff up, right? I get some of this stuff from watching other people talk about how they're presenting their listings and stuff like that. But, I mean, I just had my first listing appointment for this probably back in August, right? Early in, I don't know, August the 20th. And I was like, okay, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? So I looked at some of these videos, Jared James. I looked at some of his videos, and I watched some of the videos that Lynn Hamilton is doing on her buyer agent compensation class, and put that into use for when I sat down for my listing appointment, which I nailed, of course.
Steve, just to clarify on something for me. Let's say my seller is willing to pay a commission, and we had that form already filled out. Let's say he's willing to pay a 2% buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Because I had that form, but I still cannot, I can disclose if somebody asks me, but I cannot publicly post it anywhere, right?
You can put it on your personal website. You can
I can on my
you
personal
can put it on
website?
your brochures. You can hang a
Okay.
rider on your
Ju-
sign. You just can't put it in the MLS
Okay.
or anything linked to the MLS.
Okay.
So if like showing time, those type of things, those are the only things that you can't do. You
you
can't
can
put
have-
pictures in the MLS either. So like you saw people like there was some jokes. I don't know if they were jokes or not, but somebody had mowed their lawn and put 6% or 3% or whatever it was in their lawn, and they took an aerial shot of it. But you can post that number anywhere other than the MLS.
Okay. Okay.
All right.